recorded on our public YouTube or posted on our social media, please keep your cameras and mics off. And yeah, all right, let's get started. Just a reminder, we are recording and everything is being live streamed on YouTube. So please keep your cameras and mics off if you are not wanting to be shown on our public social media. Let's get this started then. I just want to double check. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so a little bit about us. Hopefully you know about us already, but in case you don't, we're entry level. We help you learn and get experience so that you can get hired. Let me spotlight the speakers actually. All right. So these are all the courses we have available, including product management, which we're going to be talking about today, and also growth marketing, which I think we'll talk about a little bit today as well. Some rules before we start. Please don't put unrelated information in the chat. You're welcome to ask questions and I'll say them out loud to our wonderful panelist, Alex. And just keep your mics muted so we can hear our panelists. Okay, so to get an idea of your level, please let me know if you're a complete beginner to product and tech, if you've taken a few courses, if you landed an internship before, or if you're currently working in tech. And you can just put it in the chat and we can better understand where you're at and then tailor this session to your level. Okay, so it looks like most people here are beginners, Alex. Maybe, I don't know if this changes anything, but
well, not so much.
Okay, we do have some people who are currently working in tech though, and then some people who've taken a few courses. I feel like with your workshop content, people who are complete beginners would still find it useful because it can help them stand out. Because I've never heard PM growth really being taught anywhere else. So everyone's really getting the premium information here today. Okay, let's move on. Yeah, a little bit more about us. We want to reskill 1 billion people by 2030. And just by being here, you're helping us with that. I hope you find some takeaways that are very valuable today. Again, here's our courses. I will put the link in the chat so you can check out all of our available courses. And this is what you can expect if you take one of our courses, like a certificate. We also get a reference letter and then a portfolio piece and also community feedback. I think I recognize some of you from our Discord community, which is awesome. Thank you for being here. But yeah, that's about entry level. Now on to the main event. Alex, do you want to introduce yourself and what you do?
Okay, yeah, sure. So I'm Alex, a product manager at Rocketdrop. Collectively 8 years in tech at the moment, right? And just a little over 5 years in product management. So my story is a really interesting one because I started out as a software engineer programmer in uni. So from then transitioned to product design, and from product design transitioned to product management. So I can say I, wear 3 hats as a product manager, right? My interest in the long term is ultimately venture capital, right? Which is interesting because I also took the venture capital course on entry level as well, sometime last year. I think this year. I'm not really sure which, right? So yeah, that's a little bit about my background. I've worked in various industries like retail, e-commerce, health, finance. I think the only one I haven't worked in is probably sports. I'm not really a sports person, so I don't care much for the sports industry. Yeah, that's a brief info about me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, I already feel like everyone in the audience has so many questions. Is it okay if I ask one question before you start on your workshop?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, so you mentioned you were a software engineer, product designer, and then interesting VC, but you're currently a product manager. So I already know people are going to ask, like, do you need to learn how to code? Do you need to do design as a product manager?
No, you don't need to learn how to code to be a product manager. Neither do you need to learn how to be how to design to be a product manager. But it helps. There's no disadvantage to learning how to code or knowing how to code and then being a product manager. But it's not a requirement, except, in some cases, certain roles require you to have good coding knowledge, right? For example, if you're a technical PM, it obviously makes sense that you have a strong knowledge or a background in programming, right? But it's not a requirement for a general PM or any other type of product management. That doesn't require you to dig deep into the code base of your products, basically. So no, it's not a requirement.
Yeah, I think that instead of making it seem like, because software engineer sounds so intimidating, like it sounds like you have a lot of experience before you even got into product management, but I think it's more
No,
like
it's not a lot. Maybe about 2 years. About
that's
2 years.
so much.
Yeah.
But I think it's more that like you can pivot into product management from any career, because you also
Exactly.
mentioned you were in many different industries like retail. I think
Yeah.
we all use PM skills
So,
every day.
uh, sorry.
We use PM skills every day is what I mean. So anyone
Yeah,
can pivot into it.
definitely, definitely.
Yeah. Awesome. Again, if anyone has questions, feel free to put in the chat. I will save them for later. But Alex, do you want to go ahead with what you had planned today?
Okay, awesome. So it's basically about growth strategies for or in product management, right? And I know it sounds very generic, very vague, growth strategies. That's very easy to understand. But this is more in line of products-led growth, right? And so basically a growth strategy is any plan that you put in place that allows you to or allows your business to achieve a high level of success, So this could be selling particular features, or it could be add-ons, whatever it is that basically increases your revenue, right? And improve your existing products, right? Something that allows you break into new markets, increases your market share. Those are examples of implementations of growth strategies, right? And it's important for a product manager to have a good knowledge of this because as a product manager, you're not just if your entire and only concern is the product development, then very quickly you can very quickly no longer have a product, right? So you need to have a good knowledge of how to grow that product, and that's where product-led growth or product growth strategies come in, right? So you're not the tunnel vision product manager that only focuses on the development, the design, and then you forget about the market or you forget about the profitability of your ideas. Because I've seen that happen so many times in my career as a product manager, right? And so product-led growth, a subset of product growth strategies, is a just it's a methodology where the product basically sells itself, right? And it might seem like that's a no-brainer. I mean, every product should sell itself, but that's not usually the case. Traditionally, we used to have salespeople or sales teams, right? Advertise products to certain clientele, right? So these guys either go out on the streets. I don't mean physical streets, but on the internet or uh, or networking events, to sell particular products, right? Especially in niche industries like education, health. You're not just going to find a client just sitting down on the internet randomly. You may need to actually go to hospitals to pitch to um, medical officers, right? And so product-led growth is that technology or methodology in this case that allows you to leverage the strength of your product in acquiring more users, increasing your revenue, getting more sales, right? And it's a stark contrast to the traditional sales-led growth, right? Which I've just explained briefly, right? So well, just as a summary, basically, there are three types of growth strategies, or more than three, depending on how you count them. I mentioned sales-led, there's marketing-led, and then product-led, right? So marketing-led is well, it seems similar to sales-led, but for marketing led, your entire effort is on marketing the product, not necessarily the sale, which requires the user to actually make a purchase, right? But on advertising, on media, anything that gets it out to the view of your prospective customers. But with sales led, you oftentimes require them to either pay you upfront to access your products or your software. So it's similar but different, right? And then product led is where the product basically sells itself. I'll explain a bit about that, further as we go on in the workshop. Um,
Oh, Alex, if you don't mind me
yeah,
interrupting, I think it would be helpful if there was an example of product-led growth. And I have a few examples prepared, but
okay.
do you have any as well, or should I just share mine?
Oh, well, I think the ones that come to mind, Slack is an example of product-led growth. Um, yeah, Notion is another example. Dropbox is another example as well. Netflix is a very good example. I think that's one of my most used companies as examples, right? So those products are examples of products that have used product-led growth, right?
Yes.
Example of sales-led, I struggle to find any example I can think of right now because it's very niche in the sense that it's industry specific or it's maybe enterprise specific. Imagine trying to sell a software to a company like Cisco or SAP tools, ERP tools. Those are sales led because it requires you to actually go and meet the prospective users, right? I saw someone just put in the chat that Netflix applies a lot of marketing. Yeah, definitely. Every company does marketing, right? So because you're adopting product-led growth does not mean you do not do any marketing or you just rely solely on your product to sell itself, right? Marketing is the leveler, well, a leveler, right, of product growth, right? So if you're adopting product-led growth and you decide to do zero marketing, right, that's still at your disadvantage in any case. So yeah, marketing would be applicable regardless, but it's not the main driving force, is what I'm trying to say. It's not the only thing that you're relying on to sell your products, right? Um, awesome. So
Oh, wait,
yeah,
sorry.
go on.
Let me just share my screen because I think I have more concrete examples as well. Notion was one of them, so thank you for mentioning that. So the example is actually like when you share your Notion page, it literally says Notion. So then people who you share it with are like, oh, what is Notion? And then that's how they find out. That's what we mean by product-led growth, right? And the same with Calendly. When you share it with someone, you kind of have to share it because you're trying to set up a meeting with them. It's so Calendly, so like you have to learn about them within the product. So those are some more concrete examples. I saw some people, I think you mentioned Dropbox too. Can you explain the Dropbox example? Because I think that's a really good one.
Yeah, so for Dropbox, it's less on the watermarking, which you see in these two examples, right? And more on the fact that on their acquisition. So you have the free tier on Dropbox, right? You have, I think about, is it 2 or 5 gig? I'm not really sure, right? For free, right? And if you need more, you upgrade and pay for larger storage, right? So in that instance now, they're not selling the product to you upfront, telling you to pay upfront, right? So they're adopting more of a freemium plan, which is an example of how to implement product-led growth, right? Because you just give people it's reminds me of this. So sometimes you go to restaurants and they give you testers or something like that, right? Just to try the products or try the food. And if you like it, then you go, and buy. So it's something similar to that. But it's not just relying on the fact that, okay, if all I'm doing is giving people uh maybe a free tier and expecting them to upgrade, then that doesn't necessarily mean I'm adopting product-led growth. It just means I'm adopting a strategy that may or may not put me out of business, right? Because there are some things you have to take into account when you adopt product-led growth, right? One example of that is something like saying, okay, what features do I put in the free plan? What features do I put in the paid plan? Right. And you have to arrive at that answer through data, basically. So perhaps your most used feature is not one you want to put in your free plan, because what's the point of upgrading to a paid plan? right? Another is how do I price my, paid tiers in contrast to maybe lesser tiers. For example, you can have like the pro plan, regular plan, advanced enterprise, such things like that. Right. So that's also one of the questions you need to ask yourself when implementing product-led growth. But I just, went a bit ahead of myself there. Right. So going back to examples once again, Slack is one example of a company that has adopted product-led growth, right? And so what they did was the freemium plan, right? So you could, I think, access up to 3,000 messages for free. And beyond that, you would have to pay to get the backlog of all your messages beyond that point, right? And so it's product-led growth in the sense that it's not requiring a salesperson going to pitch to you to buy Slack or pay for Slack, right? Upfront, right? So you're free to test the product, you're free to try the product, and if you decide you want more features, you want to take advantage of that platform, then you pay. Thereby they've acquired one paying user, basically, right?
So
By
does that mean that free trials are considered product-led growth?
No, so that's why I said not all product that offer free trials is a product that is adopting product-led growth, right? So it's more than just the trials, right? You also have to take into account the user experience in the sense of stuff like onboarding, for example, right? So if I'm using a product that offers me a free trial, let's say I have 14 days free trial. After the end of the 14 days, if I don't get value for that, I'm less likely to pay beyond that point, right? So it's just a product that offers me free trial. It's not, doesn't do anything for me beyond that point, right? But if I see a product that offers me not free trial now, but a free plan where I could, test the product for as long as I want, no questions asked, no credit card fees or anything like that, right? Then beyond that point, I can decide maybe after a week, after a month, after a year, if I want to upgrade to another tier or I want to stay as a free user.
That makes
Right.
sense.
So I guess I should say it's more on the method of acquisition, right? And the experience of acquisition, if that makes sense. Right. So if your experience of acquisition is pushing the user to pay upfront, then it's certainly not product led because I haven't even used the product yet. It's just you know, excuse me. Yeah, it's always just you telling me about the product. I haven't experienced it yet. So I could say it's product led growth when you've offered um, good enough products onboarding and experience, and the user is then compelled to upgrade at their own time, right? And your product offers value that nudges the user towards that direction. So if I'm not getting any value even on the free plan, it would make no sense for me to upgrade to a paid tier or a paid plan or anything like that. So it's more on the experience of acquisition and less on maybe just how or whatever what it is at that point in time. So even if it's a free trial product, right? If I'm required to pay upfront to access free trial, like some products do for some reason, then that's also not product-led growth.
I think it's very interesting you mentioned acquisition because isn't product-led growth more than just acquisition? Like, okay, keeping in mind that most of the people here are beginners, I wanted to talk a little bit about the funnel. You've heard of Pirate Metrics, right, Alex?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like we talked about acquisition, but product-led growth could be applied to any of these other ones, right?
Definitely.
Like, I think there are a few examples. Sorry, I'm just like sharing everything from our growth marketing course because it's all about product-led growth. And I feel like people don't know that. So like we have an example for acquisition, we have an example for activation and the retention. So all these stages of the funnel. And if you're not familiar with the funnel, just Google Pirate Metrics. So yeah, I think that's important to mention because I used to think product-led growth was just referral, but it's every part of the funnel.
No, it's certainly more than referrals. So it's I could say it's putting the product at the forefront before anything else, before sales, before marketing, before referrals, before advertising, just making sure that the product basically is capable of providing value in and of itself, and also the experience of using the product goes far beyond just the sales pitch ultimately, right? So it's from your onboarding, right? The first time the user sees the product, if the product actually makes sense, right? If I'm able to onboard easily, if the user experience is seamless, I have everything I need to use the product in my um, um, immediate environment, right? It doesn't require me to use another product to use your product, right? So that way it's easy for me to decide at that point if I want to be a paid user or not. If so, my retention on your product is dependent on how your product makes me feel beyond just using the product, right? So it has to offer value. It has to be the experience has to be seamless, right? And it has to be able to lead me towards being I don't want to say paid user, right? But I have to be able to contribute to your revenue as a product company, right? If I'm not doing that, then whatever the cost of acquisition for me is, that's just going down the drain,
That makes
right?
sense.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes sense to me. So basically, to summarize, as the product manager, even as a beginner product manager, use this to stand out in your interviews and stuff. You need to figure out what you can bring value to the users so that the product basically sells itself. So for Dropbox, it was giving people more storage with every referral. So storage was the value, the thing that users cared about. So if you give them more storage, they refer more people and it just grows. There's like an engine going on. It sells itself.
Yeah,
I think that was the gist of it.
yeah, more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also, I put in the chat if anyone can think of any product-led growth strategies for entry level or any other company, please share because I think this exercise can help you stand out a lot as a beginner product manager. Yeah. Do you want to move on with your presentation, Alexander?
yeah, awesome. So in implementing product-led growth strategies, right? You also have to be mindful, or I think I mentioned a couple of things, just briefly before we went on, right? So one of the things is you have to take into account is if you're offering a freemium plan, right? You have to then figure out what exactly would be in the free tier, what would be in the paid tier, right? And if you're giving out features for free, right, you have to figure out how that ties into the experience of becoming, a lifelong user, right? So basically increasing the LTV of every user on your product, right? Or the ARP of every user on your,
Dude,
you know.
everything you're saying right now is in our growth marketing course, the lifetime value calculation. I'm like,
Yeah, so it's making sure that your customer acquisition cost stays at the minimum possible, right? While increasing your lifetime value and increasing the average revenue per user, right? So basically making the product its own marketer, if that makes sense. I think that's the one line I could use to summarize all this, right? So making the product its own marketer. You could do that by watermarking, and that's what I call it because I think that's easy to understand, right? So you gave an example of Calendly and Notion, right? Some products do the same thing, like I think Wix, Squarespace, WordPress, where you see something like powered by WordPress, powered by Squarespace, powered by Wix, right? And then you see a very awesome site. You think to yourself, okay, I want a site like this, right? You click that link, it takes you back to Wix, you created your own account, you try it out, and but then so then you don't have to ask yourself, okay, is that enough? Certainly it's not enough because what if I actually click and get to your site, but for some reason it's very difficult to understand, or the onboarding process is too lengthy to the point that I'm just bored and I can't really figure out why it's taking me 15 minutes to sign up on your product, right? So a lot of it also relies in should I say progressive dissemination of information, right? So you're not just putting everything out at once, but you're leading the user from one step to another step to another step to ultimately becoming a lifetime user, right? And sometimes it might even require you to reduce your pricing or to give out things for free, as I've already said. An example using Netflix in my own strategy would be, so let's assume I use Netflix maybe once a month. Maybe I watch movies once or twice a month. I don't know who that person is in the world, but let's say you exist for some reason. And you figure out, okay, this is not worth it. I shouldn't be paying $12.99 every month, and I want to watch movies maybe once or twice a month, right? Netflix is saying, okay, you know what? I want to let's come up with a strategy that allows us to grow this product, right? Possibly horizontally, because we're not thinking of adding more features, but we want to add more users, right? And then they could say something like, okay, why not pay per view or something like that? So if you want to watch one movie, you can pay maybe 10 cents to watch one movie. And if you want to watch maybe 5 movies in a month, you pay something like, I don't know, $2 or something like that, right? Excuse me. So in that instance, they've been able to implement product-led growth that doesn't require them selling any new features, right? It doesn't require them pitching to new users, right? This might even be something that reduces churn for them. It reduces their drop-off, or account deactivation rate or something like that, right? And so by doing this, they've been able to gain more users, or rather, should I say, more paying users, right? And still maintain whatever they put in place in terms of sales, marketing, advertising, acquisition, retention. That all stays the same, but this one strategy has been able to possibly give them X amount in revenue, right? So that's one example of how to implement products led strategies. Sometimes it doesn't, it just requires you dismantling your product to figure out how best to assemble it for certain people. It's like, you're building Legos, for example, right? Make it easy enough to use that any one user could decide what exactly I want to use in this product that would not require me paying something like $100 a month for maybe I only use one feature, or I only use it twice a week or once a week or something like that.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing the examples. You mentioned customer acquisition cost and lifetime value before as well. And I wanted to share a bit about that because I feel like people don't really understand without an example. So this is also for my growth marketing course, but I think it's important to know these metrics. So ignore all the math. I know it's complicated, and just look at this graph. So the customer acquisition cost is like how much it costs you to get a customer. So for example, if you found us from social media, then it's probably free, so $0. But if you found us from an ad, we spent money on it, so it's probably a few dollars. Let's say like $30. That's a bit much, but let's say $10. And then operating costs, let's say it costs us like $5 to operate entry level. And then let's say you give us money throughout the entire course of your life. Let's say you take 2 courses with us, which is however much it is. Oh, I don't want to do math. But then you just subtract all the costs by how much money you're getting from the customer. And then whatever is left over is like, hopefully you have some money left over, and that's good. So these are the calculations that we are talking about here. And you can learn about this in our product course, and I believe also our growth marketing course. So that's what we mean when we're talking about acquisition cost and lifetime value, which is basically how much it costs and then how much money you're getting. So that's some clarification. Hopefully it helps some of the beginners here.
I hope that helps. So another strategy is removing paywalls, right? Which might seem like, okay, how do I then get paid for my service? Especially if you're maybe a blog or something like that, right? But removing barrier to entries, right, has been discovered to influence users to actually, take action far more than paywalls, right? So when you remove barriers to entries and you're able to provide extended periods of engagement, right? Ultimately, if executed well, that could lead to more engagements, which is, I mean, a good return of value in that instance, right? So when you take out friction, when you take out that difficulty, or when you take out that, roadblock, it makes it easy for your users to actually then see the value of your product, right, by interacting with it. Data-driven onboarding is another approach. Yeah, go on, please.
Sorry, I have an example of this. So Alex, I don't know when you took our VC course, but did you have to go through a very long onboarding when you signed up? Yeah, oh my God. It was so many questions. And we made everybody do that as soon as they signed up, before they even register for a course or pay or see the checkout page. They had to fill out this super long question.
Yeah,
It's
it was long. I think it took me 2 days to actually fill it out. I started one day and I got bored and I started again this
oh. Yeah, I don't know why we did that, but we removed it. So now people can just go right to the checkout page. So it's a lot better now. And that's a good example of what you were talking about.
Yeah, another is data-driven onboarding, right? A product like I think of as an example is Trello. There are more examples as well. So I don't know if you've ever used products where you sign up, you provide maybe 2 or 3 text views of information, and suddenly the experience changes. Maybe they now start to use words like, "Hi Alex, welcome to your dashboard." But you've not even fully signed up yet, right? But you're able to make some customizations, right? So I mentioned Trello does this. So if you try signing up with Trello, I think after the first page where you provide your email and password, they allow you customize the backgrounds of your product board, where you have tickets and trays, right? So you can change the color, you can add a custom background, so you're already getting the feeling of ownership without actually owning the product, right? So that's another strategy that companies use to drive product-led growth, right? So let me use a brick and mortar example. So say you want to buy a shoe. So you walk into a store, you speak with the clerk or the cashier, and then they give you a pair to try out. And they say something like, okay, maybe take a walk around the mall. We're sure to see you before you exit. So if you would be interested, you can then pay. If not, you can then drop it off before you exit, right? So you probably would have taken a couple steps in those shoes without actually paying for it, right? And if you decide, okay, this actually, this feels very good, right? Let me pay for it. Then they've been able to, in some sort of way, hook you into paying for it because, you tried it, it feels like yours. So why not just buy it, basically? So a lot of companies do this a lot as well. Yeah, I thought you were going to say something.
Sorry. I was just saying that it seems I can really tell how your previous experience as a product designer kind of informed your views. So I was trying to suggest a learning path for our students. So like first, obviously, product management level 1, level 2, and then our growth marketing course, because we keep referencing product-led growth, and then UX design level 1, where you can really improve the UX user experience.
Yeah. And so I mean, those are like examples of how you implement product-led growth. It's not limited to those, right? If you're a good product manager, you should be able to come up with your own, strategy, right, for any product that you're managing, right? So by way of metrics, there's certain metrics to take into account. There's one you probably find that's synonymous to product-led growth, which is PQL, product qualified lead, right? So if you remember the example of the sales-led growth, marketing-led growth, right? So PQL, product qualified leads, are pretty much leads or portions or insights or anything that gets the user to make an informed decision, passing a barrier or a step from free, non-paying, no addition to your revenue user to a lifetime user, right? So pretty much like the hook of your product, getting them to an aha moment where they can say, okay, this actually, this is amazing. I would like to pay for this. I would like to have this as a product, right? So it's basically whatever it is that you could do to provide stickiness or depth or some form of ownership, right, in your product, right? So you can then see that as a particular lead that can then transition from your users from free, non-paying to getting more value, right? From them as a company or as a product, right? And for sales qualified leads, it's pretty much, when they have like your phone number, they have your email, and then they can follow up and send you 500 emails to buy the product, right? But with product qualified leads, it could be something like an abandoned cart email, right? Or something like maybe a reminder, I was just thinking of you, you haven't used this product in a while, right? Or it could be um, something like a feature that you offer that allows them make the good gesture of paying for your product, or um, being a lifetime user of your product, right? And that is your retention rate. So your ARR, your MRR, that's also a good indicator of how well your strategy is doing,
Okay,
right?
wait. Let's define MRR. What is MRR?
Yeah, so that's your monthly recurring revenue,
So
right? So that's your revenue, like month on month.
so I think the most popular example might be like a subscription. Actually, so many people think that entry levels fees is a subscription, but it's just a one-time payment. But if we made it a subscription, our monthly recurring revenue would be so good. But
Yeah,
yeah.
it would. It would, right? And so yeah, it's even that could be a strategy, right? Imagine maybe your product costs something like 200 users, $200, right? And it's a one-time fee of $200. Some people actually find it easier to pay $10 every month, right? To paying $200 one time, right? And so you could actually say something like, okay, you know what? Let's try out a strategy. Let's bring out an option that allows you pay monthly, right? For a lesser amount, and see how long you actually do pay monthly, right? There's a psychological, I don't know if I call it a law or a rule, right? That sometimes prevents people from canceling subscriptions. So that may work in your favor if your product actually just gives them a good feeling once a while, right? They may continue, paying throughout that.
Okay, makes sense. Wait, also, sorry, I keep interrupting, but there's so many interesting things going on in the chat. I just wanted to call them out before it gets lost. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Yeah, we have a question here actually. There was somebody asking about giving out free samples of beer at a party. Do you think that's product-led growth or marketing? And like, how do you differentiate the two?
So my question would then be, sorry, I'm asking the questions to a question, right? But my question would then be, is there anything that actually would nudge them to buying your beer afterwards, right? Chances are the answer is probably no. If it's just free samples, I think I covered that with the free trial as well. If it's just free samples, there's nothing that would actually make me go buy this next time, or nothing that would actually make me, see this in a store and go, oh, I actually like this, I should get this, right? Then probably it's not product-led growth, right? That's just a form of marketing, a form of guerrilla marketing, basically, right? My twist on this to make it product-led growth would be say something like, you give them a free sample and you have them maybe return the bottle to get 2 free bottles or something like that, right? It's risky. It might not work for all the companies or the products, but you bet that if I drink that one bottle, chances are I'm going to keep that one bottle so I could bring that to your company and get 2 more free bottles, right? Or maybe you don't get a free bottle, maybe you get, I don't know, a pen or something like that, right? I think the most important thing is creating that relationship right off the bat.
Yes, I
Right.
love what you said. Okay, I want to add more. So you return your bottle for like if you bring a friend, you both get, it's like a buy one get one free, but you're just
Yeah,
returning the
something like
bottle.
that.
So it spreads because
Yeah.
like you're bringing friends, and now all your friends drink that beer. Oh, that's so
Yeah. So
good.
it's sort of like a multi-level marketing twist. But I mean, so that would qualify as product-led growth, right? But I mean, not just that, even because you could have other strategies that can surround that, maybe experiences that they could, use on their phone, maybe like maybe they scan the QR on the bottle, and the QR takes them to a site with interesting stats about, I don't know, sugar, about the city, just something, right? Because remember I said you have to sort of drive for stickiness, for depth of use, right? Depth of use here in marketing or in physical product terms would be, say, something like not just using it one day or using it 1 minute in a day, but using it maybe 2 hours a day or for 20 days out of 30. Excuse me, right? That would actually count as stickiness, because at this point, you've kind of got them hooked on your product. Now, I should say that there are dark patterns to this as well. You learn this as a designer, as a product designer, right? You learn dark patterns as a designer as well. And so there should be ethical considerations of whatever strategy you're thinking to implement in your product-led strategy also. So you don't build products that make people addicted, right? In my mind, I'm thinking TikTok or Twitter or any of all these other social media sites, right? But yeah, it's possible. So that's where ethical considerations come in, right? That's a must-have skill set for a product manager as well. But it's not it's not our discussion for today. So I'm not going to go into all that, right? But yeah, you're optimizing for stickiness, you're optimizing for depth of use, you're optimizing for for increasing your return rate, for retention. So yeah, that's that or that example.
Yeah. Okay, wait, I have another example for you. So what if there's a company and they send you a completely free product? It costs them like $5 to do it. But then they find in their data that when they send you free products, you're more likely to buy because of the principle of reciprocity. So when you buy, people usually spend like $30. So cost of acquisition was like $5. You spend $30, that's the customer lifetime value, which is they make $25 profit basically. So it made sense mathematically. In that case, when they send you the free product, is that product-led growth?
It can be product-led growth if implemented correctly, right? And what I mean by that is that could once again easily be a loss of the company, in the sense that you could send out millions of $5 samples, and what if nobody buys it, right? Although you did mention that from their data they could figure out that getting the free samples prompts you to buy, right? So yeah, that's why I said it could be, but if there's no data to back it up, then you may actually be wasting money, right? So a better alternative would be you open up a booth where people can actually come to your store or your stand, test the product there, try it there. If they're inclined to buy, they buy and then they leave, right? That's more economical to sending out free samples, right? And then you could do this in a way that, takes advantage of different kind of technology, AR, VR, so you could actually have setups that don't require you to send out your products to millions of people or thousands of people. You could maybe just them go into a physical store, or you can partner with a store, just something that requires you reducing your CAC to the barest minimum, right? So if your CAC still goes way up and you're expecting people to come back to pay, that's not really product-led growth.
Okay. I think you make a very interesting point, because even though the data says that you're making a profit from sending people free stuff, that can always change. There's always market conditions. There's always like
Exactly.
the customer might change.
Would
Yeah.
may not be too for may not play fair with you, basically, right? So
Yeah. Interesting. Where did you learn all this, by the way? I'm just curious. Like, is it from your experience or did you take it from a course?
it's a mix of both. I mean, you try and error. Having been 8 years in tech, sometimes you make mistakes that that you definitely don't want to repeat. So you have to learn and make corrections. And I did take a couple of courses, but majority of this is should I say an amalgamation of both. So yeah, it's not just one one source, basically.
Okay. Actually, you said you had like 8 years in tech, right? That's a long time. How did
Yeah.
like I know a lot of people here are beginners and this isn't super related, but I think it would be helpful if you shared like your number one tip for beginners to stand out based on your experience in tech.
Um, I would say be original. Well, maybe not so original because you know that might come off as, oh, I don't want to copy what anyone is doing, right? But originality is kind of overrated. But far more than that, I would say is offer value, right? As long as you offer value and you're you know you're not just copying whatever strategy you find. You're not just trying to be like everyone else, right? It sounds very cliche. It sounds very vague. Excuse me. I have a bit of a cold. But yeah, so offering value is one extremely important part that we sometimes overlook as tech people, right? Because we think it's easy to recreate whatever skill set that anyone has, right? If you're a product manager, it's easy to take a course and think you're a product manager or assume you're a product manager, right? But a lot of times it goes beyond just taking the course. It goes beyond just reading something on a blog, right? There's also that aspect of um, having a long-term view of what you're doing, in the sense that you're not just thinking about the fact that I want a job right now, right? But you're thinking about how to contribute to where you're going to work and also to the industry in the long term, right? So systems thinking basically, right? So where you're not just only focused on one part, but you're also conscious of how the different parts make up the whole, right? So which is why for me it's it was a no-brainer for me to have an interest in VC because I could see where my trajectory was going and I figured, okay, this actually makes sense. You know, I could actually run the data and discover that, okay, you know, this is perhaps the next best step for me to start, right? But when you're starting in tech, really, it's also easy to get very overwhelmed, right? So many roles, so many titles. I mean, in design, there's product designer, there's UX designer, there's interface designer, there's interaction designer, and they pretty much all do the same thing. Well, not the same thing really, but you know, there are similarities. So it's easy to get overwhelmed, but if you're focusing more on the title and less on the value that you provide in that role, then that's where you're probably going to get stuck, right? But if you're focusing more on the value that you can offer and how to expand your capability and your capacity beyond just that role, then it makes sense for you to, you know, work in a position that gives you leverage to do so, right? Because everyone needs to have leverage. Basically, if you don't have leverage in any role for on any job, then you're pretty much a template that anyone could replace or anything can replace, right? So offering value, having a long-term view of where you're going, much like your product management, really, there's a, you know, you set up your roadmap, you prioritize your backlog. You could do the same for your career as well as a tech person, right? Have a roadmap for your career, prioritize certain, you know, aspects in that career, right? You can utilize frameworks, which in this case would be mentalities or perspectives that could get you through certain parts of that career. And then you could then see where the end would be. So as a product has its own life cycle, your career also has its own life cycle,
Oh my
right? So you have
gosh.
to know where you are in that life cycle.
Dude,
You know,
every single Oh, sorry to interrupt. I was gonna say product manage your career is so important. Have a roadmap for your career. That's what one of our students did, and she landed like 3 jobs in product management in like 6 months.
awesome.
Yeah, sorry, you can keep going. I was just so excited.
Yeah, so I mean, just have a roadmap for your career, right? It's not, so many people don't do this, right? But you have to also understand that your career should also give back to you, and not just you pouring out your entire life in what you're doing, right? So there's a bit of reciprocity that should um come in play here, right? One of what you're getting back should be satisfaction, should be fulfillment, should be peace of mind, right? If you don't have peace of mind in what you're doing, then just, I mean, it's not to say that there will not be challenges, right? It's like with a product, for example, if you have a solid product vision, you have solid product strategies, and you've been able to do your market research extremely well, then you should know that even if there will be hiccups in the market, right, the product vision should be able to be that that North Star that you're looking at, that keeps you consistent on that path, right? Your career should have its own North Star as well, right? So North Star basically, means that one thing that you're looking forward to as the most important thing, right? I'll use a tech example for this. Airbnb's North Star could be something like the number of nights stayed or something like that, right? So it doesn't matter the number of monthly active users, it doesn't matter the number of signups, but if the number of nights booked is 0 in 1 month, then they've pretty much done 0, right? Uber could be something like the number of maybe the distance traveled or something like that, right? So you know that no matter what it is, you're trying to optimize for increasing the number of distance traveled. So your career should have its own North Star as well, right? That place or that position or that value offered that would keep you consistent along the path that you're on, right? So you don't get distracted, you don't get overwhelmed, you don't get thrown off the bus, right? Before you get to your North Star, basically. So yeah, having a roadmap certainly makes things easy. It doesn't make it stress-free, but it makes it easy, I guess is the trick, yeah.
Okay. That's so interesting. So to summarize, the roadmap helps with consistency. That's one thing that stood out to me when you were talking, because every single successful entry-level student I talked to who landed a job, it was very hard. They always had to do outreach, code DMs on LinkedIn, but they stayed consistent and eventually succeeded. So I think that roadmap will help a lot with staying consistent. We have another question here, if you don't mind taking a bit to answer. This might be the last question I ask because we're running out of time, but what about data analysis? Like, do you often have to look at the data to decide growth strategies for the product yourself, or do you rely on data analysts within the company?
You should be able to look at the data yourself, right? I mean, because I'm thinking here, if there's no data analyst present in that company or on that product, then you're in a bad place, right? So you should be able to look at data yourself and make data informed decisions, right? It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You don't have to use Python or R or SPSS or anything like that, right? It could just be looking at your mix panel. It could be looking at your Google Analytics. It could be looking at your Hotjar, your Lucky Orange, your Amplitude, right? Your SEMrush, of course, if you're including SEO in this as well, right? To make informed decisions. And sometimes if you're in a data strong company, that would be that person that is the data analyst that could help you, present the data on Tableau or Power BI and makes it easy for you to consume, right? But if that's not in place, then you should be able to consume data yourself. You should be able to gather data yourself, right? It could be something as simple as, say, your user marketing research, or sorry, your user research, right? It could be conducting, very basic user research, surveys, your NPS, right? It doesn't have to be anything too elaborate, to start anyway, because obviously you have to grow beyond that point, right? But to start, it can be something as simple as your NPS, your CSAT. I'm sorry, I'm using all these abbreviated words.
Yeah, can you explain what NPS and CSAT is?
Okay, so NPS is your Net Promoter Score, right? Those things where, you see something like, how likely are you to refer this to your friend? And then someone says, 2 or 1, right? And then CSAT is customer satisfaction score, right? And that's pretty much, you can get that by a number of ways, but a numbered survey can make that easy for you, right? So maybe a thumbs up if you like this product, thumbs down, reviews, that's like one way to get your customer satisfaction score.
Okay, I think one thing to mention is you talked about user interviews. So conducting user interviews, that kind of research surveys, all of that is covered in entry level's product management level 1 course. So I linked it in the chat if you want to check that out. But I also email everything out to you after this call. Okay, I know that was the last question. So do you have
No, it's fine.
anything else?
I think I can take one more if there's one more question.
Okay, so a lot of people are confused about the career roadmap. Like, how do you even get started with that? Like, what are the
Uh,
steps?
okay, so in order not to get too, I'm trying not to be too techy or too nerdy here, but they can actually use a framework, right? I've tried this out with a couple of my mentees, and it worked well. So say you have a table, right, and you have your columns and your rows on that table. You can then put your interest, right, on the columns, right? So say something like, I don't know, product marketing, right? And then you could then plot your level of interest in this role. You can plot the barrier to entry. You could plot the learning curve. You could plot the return in value, maybe in how much it pays, the saturation in that industry, right? On the columns, right? And for your roles, you have each interest points, product marketing, product management, product design, right? That's one way you can arrive at the data-driven answer as to whatever career would work best for you. Now, beyond that point, so that's like a RISE framework for your career, basically, or something similar to a RISE framework for your career, right? So RISE is a framework in product management, reach, impact, capacity, and efforts, right? I always mix up the E, better effort or efficiency, one of the two, right? So beyond that point is where you now get into your roadmap, which is, okay, now I've picked the career that I think I would be interested in even in 10 years from now. No pressure if you do change your mind, because that's totally fine, right? But beyond that point, you could then say, okay, what do I need to know now that would help me in this career? What do I need to know in 3 months' time to help me in this career? What do I need to know in 3 years' time to help me in this career? So you have like, a staggered lineup of skills, of maybe certifications, if your career needs that, right? Of connections, of degrees, whatever it is, right? So you can start with maybe even 3 weeks. So what do I need to know in 3 weeks to actually get a job in this field? What do I need to know in 3 months? In 3 years, maybe in 30 years, if you're in depth, if you're in there for the long haul. Um, and then so that's your roadmap basically, because your roadmap is whatever you need to do now that adds up to provide, or adds up to a cumulative return on investment in 3 years from now. That's your roadmap, right? And you can also factor in, different forces beyond your control, like AI, for example. What if I'm replaced by AI? What do I then do, right? If you're asking yourself that question, or maybe if that's in your, what do I need to know in 3 years, then you might be able to pivot before that point, right? For example, with design, when I was a product designer, I could always, or I had the inclination to, the nudge to move beyond that point, right? Because I figured it's not enough for me to just design beautiful products and experiences, right? I want to also be able to make key decisions in the product development. And so it makes sense for me to transition from design to management, right? The same way as a programmer, I figured, this works, it's functional, but it's not, the experience of it is not the best. How can I, make sure that I have a say in the design of the experience? So every career has its own, um, should I say, upgrade points? I guess is what I would use now. Maybe upgrade is not the best word now, but yeah, I guess that's the closest I can use. I can think of, right? So you should be able to figure out where that point is for you and what you need to do to get there and go beyond that point. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that was so helpful. I'm going to set up a template for people to copy on a spreadsheet or something and make their own career roadmap. That sounds great. Is it okay if people connect with you on LinkedIn if they have more question or any guidance?
Sure,
Awesome.
that's totally fine.
I will dig up your LinkedIn and email it to everyone. So to make sure we have your email, you must be registered on our Luma here. So make sure we have your email. I think that's all the time we have here today, but I'm going to message you, Alex, and maybe we can do a part 2. We'll see. But
Yeah, sure.
we're out of time.
Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your insights. I don't know if you're seeing, but so many people in the comments on our YouTube live stream and also in Zoom are finding this very helpful. So we really appreciate your insights. Thanks so much. I hope you have a great evening, morning,
Yeah,
afternoon.
it's
Yeah.
it's around 6:03 p.m. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I hope you get a chance to eat some dinner. Thanks so much. All
You're
right.
welcome. You're
Bye.
welcome. Bye.